Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing super well. Today we're going to be talking about what happened to Melissa Chávez. I have never heard of this case before. It wasn't until one of you guys actually sent this to me on Instagram that I finally heard what happened. So I'm sure if you're from there, you probably already heard about what happened to her, but I definitely wanted to make a video on it and spread awareness to a newer audience because, what happened to Melissa is, first of all, very frustrating. It just makes you realize that there are a lot of flaws in the judicial system, as well as flaws in institutions that are meant to protect minors. So it's a really sad case, and I did just want to put a trigger warning out there that we are going to be talking about sexual assault and violence. The research for this case was kind of difficult. It was pretty long because not a lot of the articles are in English. Everything was pretty much in Spanish, so I did my best to translate everything, but of course, if I miss anything, please feel free to let me know in the comment section down below so I can update my information. Now, real quick before we get into the video, I quickly want to thank today's sponsor, Rocket Money. Thank you to Rocket Money for sponsoring today's video. Rocket Money's mission is to meaningfully improve the financial health of millions of people. They empower their members to achieve all of their financial goals by canceling unwanted subscriptions, lowering your bills, setting budgets up for you, monitoring your credit score, and providing a holistic view of your finances all in one place. As you guys know, I am planning my wedding and there's just a lot to pay. It's really expensive. I was not expecting it to be this expensive. So lately I've been trying to find ways to reduce my monthly expenses and, just kind of plan out for my wedding. That's when I discovered Rocket Money, and one of my favorite things about them is that they help you cancel unwanted subscriptions, which to me is a huge problem. I feel like I'll subscribe to things and then I'll forget that I subscribed to it, and then I'll get the bill the next month and realize, oh my gosh, I literally just got charged like $20 for something that I don't even use. So I really like that Rocket Money has a feature where they can safely and securely identify reoccurring charges and cancel unwanted subscriptions for you. They also have another feature that can let you lower your bills, so all you have to do is upload a photo of your bills, tap a quick button, and then Rocket Money can negotiate your bills for you, ranging from internet service bills to cell phone bills and to cable bills. You can go to rocketmoney.com/Jackie Flores or click the link in the description box down below. Thank you again to Rocket Money for sponsoring today's video. Melissa Denise Antonia Chávez was born in 2008 in Coquimbo, Chile, to her mother Mirta Luisa Ardiles and her father Denise Chávez. She was the youngest of 4 siblings, and she's described as being very quiet, shy, not with that many friends, and not as outgoing as most girls her age or as her siblings were. Her siblings were very out there, but Melissa was kind of more on the reserved side. She liked to be quiet, and she just enjoyed hanging out in her room, listening to music with her headphones on, and just relaxing. Everyone who knew her described her as a very happy and kind little girl, despite being more, socially distant from everyone else. Her mother Mirta was actually married twice. First to a man named Milton Frey, then to a man named Denise Chávez, whom became Melissa's father, and then she actually divorced him shortly after Melissa was born. So to make ends meet, Mirta began working at a local bar called La Chilenita, and there was one night where she met another man named Luis Alejandro Santander Espinosa. I know the names are kind of a lot, but anyways, so she met Luis at this bar, and at the time, Luis actually had a girlfriend, so he was already in a relationship, but as soon as he met Mirta, he decided to leave his current girlfriend so that he could start dating Mirta, who was actually 8 years older than him, so there was a pretty big age gap between the two of them. In 2010, Luis and Mirta took their relationship to the next level, and they moved in together and married when Melissa was only 2 years old, and then sometime after that, Mirta got pregnant. Melissa was gonna have a baby brother. So let's talk a little bit about the family dynamic. Melissa was the only one of her siblings that lived with her mother. The rest lived with their fathers and their own families, so at this house, it was basically just Melissa, her stepfather Luis, and then her mother Mirta. And then soon she was going to be joined by her new baby brother. Now at first, Melissa didn't really like the fact that her mother got remarried, but sometime after that, and especially after her new baby brother was born, she grew to accept it. She grew to accept the relationship and the fact that Luis was going to be a part of her life. And for a while, they were living as a pretty happy and normal family. However, when Melissa was 6 years old, in 2014, Melissa told her older sister that she was being repeatedly sexually abused by her stepfather Luis. She had also reported this to her school psychologist, and she explained in great detail what was happening to her while she was left in the care of Luis when her mother wasn't present. All of these things would only happen when her mother was gone. So the psychologist and her sister reported this immediately to Mirta, and then Mirta called the police and reported everything to them. So it seemed like Mirta was actually taking action, and she actually wanted to protect her daughter from her new stepfather. However, that did change because Mirta later withdrew it because she said that she was scared Melissa would end up being sent to a center for minors, and then she also said that Melissa was just lying and that she was doing this for attention because she wanted to go back and live with her biological father Denise, since she didn't really like Luis from the start, which is just very disappointing. I understand that there probably are situations where people have lied about things like this, because they want attention or, because they're upset with their parents. So I understand that there probably are cases like this where the truth isn't actually the truth. But I feel like a mother should just always believe her child. You should always take what your child says and try to do a thorough investigation into it and just believe them, not just assume that they're doing it for attention and that they're doing this, because they just want to accuse their stepfather of assault. So even though Mirta withdrew the complaint, it was still going to be taken seriously by the police and a case was actually opened. The police wanted to figure out what actually happened. Why is Melissa making these allegations and is it true? Also, why was Mirta so quick to withdraw her statement to the police? So they really wanted to get to the bottom of this, but in the meantime, while an investigation was open, Mirta did lose custody of Melissa temporarily because she actually had to complete a family court-ordered almost 2-year outpatient program to undergo psychological evaluations, which is a protective measure for alleged violations in children and adolescents. So, since Mirta had to go to this program, Melissa was going to be sent to go live with her biological father, Dennis. She lived with him for some time and, things were okay, but he was ultimately ruled unfit to take care of Melissa because he was suffering from depression and alcoholism. So, the court then decided that instead of living with her biological father, Melissa was going to go live with her aunt, the sister of her father, Dennis, who was named Gina Chávez. So, Gina took temporary custody of Melissa and she cared for her while Mirta was in the program completing psychological and psychiatric tests. Now, in the duration of the program, Gina says that she was basically never contacted by the court or the program facility to let her know if Mirta was making progress in the program or, how she was doing. Gina was actually the one that had to frequently call the facility to check in on Mirta and, see how everything was going, which she thought was weird. Gina's literally taking care of the daughter of one of their patients. So shouldn't they be the ones calling Gina to check in on Melissa and, make sure that everything's okay? She just thought it was a little bit weird. Now, regardless, she trusted the system and she felt like, maybe Mirta would get better. However, later, she actually regrets making this statement, which we'll get into. Now, once Mirta completed the program and the professionals who were working with her said that everything looked good, the court closed the case due to lack of evidence. And, mainly because Mirta claimed that Luis was no longer going to be in their lives. She basically said that she was not going to, move in with him. He was not going to be around the kids, nothing. And that he wouldn't be doing that again in the future. So she was basically telling the police and the justice system that Melissa was going to be safe again and that it was perfectly fine for her to come home with her because Luis was basically out of the picture. So she tells the authorities this and they agree with her. They believe her and Melissa is released back into the custody of Mirta. Now, Gina, the aunt that was watching Melissa, thought that this was weird because authorities just kind of took Mirta's word for it. They didn't further investigate to ensure the home was safe for Melissa to return to. They didn't confirm her statements claiming that Luis was out of her life. Nothing. They basically were like, oh, okay, you say Luis isn't going to be a part of the life anymore? All right, we believe you. Here's your daughter. It was just really weird, and, Gina actually wasn't wrong for thinking that something wasn't right. Because in reality, Mirta actually lied to everyone. She never ended things with Luis, and she manipulated everyone into believing that she did. She was actually still with him, with the man that her daughter accused of sexually abusing her. It's just crazy. Now, I understand that you don't want your child to end up in a juvenile center, and, you don't want to lose your daughter, but what about the dangers that she was facing at home by her stepfather? Melissa literally accused him of abusing her, but Mirta insisted on keeping her in the home where there would be a risk for her to be abused again. It's just really disappointing behavior. Now, with Melissa back in the picture, Mirta and Luis decided to move to an area called Villa Talinay, which I'm so sorry if I butchered that. I literally just watched so many videos on how to pronounce it, but for some reason I don't know how to say it. I'm so sorry. But they moved to this new area with Melissa's half-brother in search of a quieter life after the allegations about Luis were out in the public. Because people started to hear, Melissa accused her stepfather of abusing her. So they were kind of just tired of what the public was saying, so they decided to move to this new town and just kind of have like a fresh start. Melissa was actually really happy to be in this neighborhood because where they lived before was a little dangerous and just not as nice. But now this area was a little bit more calm, a little bit more relaxed, and Melissa just felt like this neighborhood was way better. She really started to like it. She also started 7th grade, and she just continued to keep to herself, doing what she liked best, which was hanging out in her room, listening to music, and just relaxing. The family had regular outings, and they actually hung out a lot. Neighbors say that they were a pretty regular family. They never really showed any signs of trouble at the home. They didn't hear any fights between them, nothing. Melissa said that her mother could at times be really demanding of her, but that they overall had a really good and close relationship. So everything seemed to be going well. But then things changed for the worse. On November 26, 2020, at around 11:21 in the morning, police and firefighters arrived at Melissa's house after neighbors reported a house on fire. Neighbors saw large clouds of smoke coming out of the second floor that were growing bigger and bigger. The neighborhood quickly flooded with police, with firefighters, neighbors, and just random people that were passing by and saw the fire and, decided to pull over to see what was going on. So the neighborhood was packed, and everyone was just hoping that no one was inside the house. However, when emergency services entered the home and went up to the second floor where the fire was coming from, they found Melissa's body lying in the top bunk of her bedroom bunk bed. Now, upon seeing Melissa's body, who at this time is only 12 years old, firefighters believed that she died due to suffocation from all of the smoke that filled the home. But that belief was quickly shot down when they removed her from the home and had a clearer view of her body without all of the smoke around her, because the smoke kind of clouded their judgment. But now that they were out in the open and could see her clearly, they discovered that she had severe stab wounds to her head, face, neck, and body. They realized that this wasn't an accident. This was no accidental fire, and Melissa just happened to be sleeping in bed, and that's how she accidentally got trapped and passed away. No, they realized that this was a serious crime and that someone tried to cover it up with arson. This really shocked all of the emergency services because, how is it possible that this little girl suffered these severe injuries while also being left inside a burning home? Who would do this, and how did this even happen? It actually became a homicide investigation, and Melissa's body was sent to get an autopsy to determine her manner of death. So, after this, authorities immediately named Mirta and Luis as persons of interest because they were the last people seen leaving the home before the fire happened. Now, the reason they know that Mirta and Luis are the last people to leave the home before the fire is because neighbors actually had security footage that captured the entire thing. Police looked at this footage, and the neighbor's camera was really good. This is one of the few times where the camera is at a perfect angle that can capture everything. So this camera captured Luis and his son leaving the home by Didi, which is kind of like an Uber. He left at around 10:30 in the morning to attend a vaccination event at his son's school. And then shortly after, the camera captured Mirta leaving the house at around 11:15 a.m. to go to the dentist. And then just 6 minutes later, the entire house went up into flames. Police looked at all of this and they just thought it was a little bit odd. What happened in those 6 minutes from Mirta leaving the house to her daughter dying? So after the neighborhood found out that this was not an accident and that this was a homicide investigation, they all truly thought that there was a killer on the loose, and they were really scared of this happening again. They believed that there was just no way that Mirta and Luis would be able to do this. How could the parents of this little girl be involved in her death? In such a horrible death, not even just an accidental death, but in a brutal stabbing. So everyone just really thought that this was a stranger. Someone was watching the house, saw that Mirta was leaving, and then decided to go in and kill Melissa. It was just hard for everyone to understand how someone could do this to their own child. The case was quickly on all of the news outlets, and people were just so confused as to how this could have happened in such a, kind of quiet and relaxed neighborhood. So police and the news interviewed Mirta and Luis, and they stated that they had nothing to do with this, and that they were just as devastated, angry, and confused as everyone else.
Entonces, pero no me imaginé en el momento esto, que la asesinaron. Para mí esto es atroz, es algo terrible, terrible. ¿Cómo? ¿Quién fue capaz de hacer tanto daño a ella? A ella que era una niña de amor, puro amor. Mi hija era una niña no era una niña de calle, era una niña de casa. preocupada mucho de mí, mucho, hijo, mucho era.
They were actually crying while doing these interviews. They were demanding justice, and Mirta said, quote, "It's terrible that someone could kill your daughter. It's terrible. Who and why would do this?" Both parents genuinely seemed upset. You can actually watch interviews of Luis where he's crying, and you can just tell that he feels so distraught about what happened to his daughter. They did multiple interviews talking about this, and they told investigators and the media that they believe someone waited for Mirta to leave, and then they entered the home and killed Melissa.
Yo me imagino que a lo mejor esa persona estaba ahí cuando yo entré a hablar con la Mary, estaba allí, por eso que...
Luis said that the people who did this were going to pay for this horrible thing that they did to their daughter. They claimed that they were a happy family. You know, they were saying, we're a happy, normal family, so it's unfair that this happened to us. And Luis even said, those people that broke into the house should have taken our valuables. They should have taken our things. They didn't need to take my daughter's life.
Lo único que nosotros ahora queremos es justicia. Es justicia.
They also said that maybe it was a neighbor who was, quote, unwell with mental illness that broke into the house to do this. So they were just throwing a lot of theories around. However, their theories were not taken into consideration since when police reviewed the neighbor's camera footage, no one was seen leaving or entering the home after Mirta left. Mirta was literally the last person to see Melissa alive and the very last person to leave the house. So the investigation ultimately honed in on her and her alone. I mean, how could this have happened? You know, if what they're saying is true that Mirta did leave the house and someone was there waiting for her, it's just really quick for someone to enter the house in under 6 minutes and put the entire house up into flames. And there was just no signs of anyone leaving or entering the house after Mirta left, so you would think that maybe it would have been captured by surveillance footage. Meanwhile, while everything is going on with the investigation, Melissa's autopsy came back and they discovered that she suffered a blow to the head and 11 wounds that caused her to hemorrhage. The pathologist says that she would have been able to be treated and saved, but no, she was just left to suffer in pain, essentially dying for about an hour before the fire began. Now, if Melissa was dying for an hour before the fire actually began and firefighters arrived, that means that Mirta was still at home when she was dying. And since she was the last person to leave the home, it was even more clear to police that she was involved. So everyone was just confused. You know, if a stranger actually did do this, that meant that this stranger would have had to enter the house an hour before Mirta left. He would have entered the house, killed Melissa in such a brutal way, and then started preparing the house to light it on fire, all while Mirta was still home. I mean, how would she not have heard someone brutally killing her daughter? Now, of course, before they could arrest her, police had to have more evidence. Apart from the autopsy results, a knife was found in the kitchen of the home with Melissa and Mirta's DNA on it. Forensics determined that the knife was the same size as the wounds and that it had been washed afterwards and then placed back inside the kitchen. Authorities also determined that the fire had started 30 minutes before Mirta left the home, which places Mirta, like I already mentioned, in the home when the fire was first lit. It's just a lot of evidence against her, and you know, with this information, expert opinions, and biological evidence, police arrested Mirta for parricide and arson on February 2nd, 2021, and she was actually placed in a preventative detention while further investigations were proceeded. Now, additionally, detectives also reopened the prior case from 2014, where Mirta filed a complaint against Luis so that they could also convict her as an accomplice to repeated rape and sexual abuse. Now, the reason that they were charging Mirta as an accomplice to repeated rape and sexual abuse is because it was discovered in Melissa's autopsy that she had actually been sexually assaulted just 6 hours before her death by Luis, which breaks my heart. I mean, this poor girl went through so much already, you know, so much before her death. She was allegedly assaulted by her stepfather, then she was stabbed 11 times, she was abused and just beaten, and then she was just left there, as if she was nothing. And as if all of that just isn't bad enough, she was literally just left there to burn in a fire. It's just not fair, and she was only 12 years old, you guys. It's not right. So because of all of this evidence, Luis was supposed to be arrested as well. However, before police could find him and arrest him, neighbors say that a truck went to the family's home and that they saw Luis packing all of his things and then he just left. He literally vanished from the neighborhood and no one knew where he went, not even his family. His face was all over the news and everyone was just asking him to come back. You know, if he truly was innocent, why didn't he just come forward and tell the media and, you know, give them a statement to clear his name up and clear everything up once and for all? You know, if he actually didn't assault Melissa before that, he could have just said it. You know, even his own parents were calling on him him to make a statement via TV interview since they had not heard from him. There were no phone calls from him, no messages, nothing. However, Luis never showed up. He never publicly appeared to give a statement after this. He never gave himself up, nothing. So police spoke with a woman that he previously had a relationship with, and she says that her memory of him is not good. I mean, after all, he literally dropped her to go date Mirta, who was 8 years older than him. Because remember, he was in a relationship at the time that he met her. Now, this girlfriend says that since then, she has not spoken to Luis and she has no idea where he could be. He essentially went into hiding, and it wasn't until months later that he was finally found. He was arrested on November 17th, 2021 for repeated rape and sexual abuse, and he was also placed in a preventative detention center. So Mirta and Luis were both placed in this center, and other less measures such as house arrest were not considered for them because, according to authorities, the two of them, quote, constituted a danger to society. Mirta was at risk of facing 18 years for arson in an inhabited place, 15 years as an accomplice to the repeated crime of rape of a child under 14 years of age, and then 7 years as an accomplice to the repeated crime of sexual abuse of a child under 14 years of age. Now, as for Luis, he was also at risk of 18 years for repeated rape and 15 years for sexual abuse. After this, they were both placed at a prison pending their trial. So after they were arrested, Mirta and Luis began looking for a lawyer, and they initially struggled to find one that would represent them. They kind of were going back and forth between lawyers, and in the end, they hired a local criminal lawyer named Carlos Silva, but they decided not to continue with him after he expressed doubt in their case, because again, they're trying to claim that they're innocent and that a stranger did this, that a stranger went into the family home, killed Melissa, and then set the whole house on fire. So a lot of lawyers were just finding it difficult to prove their case. In the end, Luis and Melissa ultimately landed with a lawyer named Nicolás Pávez Cuevas, who was from a really well-known law firm in Santiago, Chile. Nicolás believed in their innocence from the beginning and said that the most important thing was to clarify the truth. However, he was only going to represent Mirta, not Luis. I'm not sure why. So now that Mirta had her own representation, Luis was left, scrambling. And in the end, he was going to be represented by a public defender named Alejandro Garcia. Now, the regional prosecutor of Coquimbo, named Adrian Vega Cortez, who specializes in cases of sexual crime, as well as the head of the Andocayo, how do you say that? I'm so sorry if I butchered that. Of the Andocayo local prosecutor's office, Jocelyn Weiser, were assigned to Melissa's case. And after they were assigned to the case, both sides began building up the case for the trial. While awaiting trial and in the preventative detention, Mirta complained that she couldn't go outside to the patio or have, virtual meetings with her lawyers in the common areas because the other inmates would constantly be yelling insults at her. I'm sure they also heard about the case and heard about how she's being accused of, murdering her child, so she was not having a good time in jail. There was actually a hearing held for her complaints, and an improvement in her condition was requested by her lawyer Nicolás. The court did end up granting these improvements, and she was immediately separated from the rest of the prison, to protect her from any further injuries and from, any physical assaults. So it was decided that they were going to move Mirta to the health unit at the prison, away from other inmates, and, that this was strictly for security measures because they wanted to make sure that nothing bad happened to her. During her time in the preventative detention, Mirta began her days at 7 o'clock in the morning. She would eat breakfast, and then she would start putting on her makeup, and she would kind of just chat with her cell partner. Her days were pretty much the same, that was her typical routine, and they also say that she would sleep for a lot of the time, and that there was actually one time where a security guard was watching her through the cameras, and they realized that she wasn't moving. So everyone started to freak out thinking that something had happened to her, and they went into her cell, but it turns out that she was okay, nothing had happened to her, she was just sleeping. Now, Mirta was also allowed to hear the radio for a few hours, and every single week she received packages from her family. And then she was also allowed to call her sister and her other children just to talk. So it didn't seem like there was a lot of strictness for her while she was in jail. That was pretty much her daily routine while she was there waiting for her trial to begin. Now, officers say that they never saw her look unfazed, and it never looked like she was actually sad for the death of her daughter, that she was literally being accused of murdering. She was there there not because she did a petty crime. She was there because she was accused of murdering her daughter and then lighting her body on fire. But yet, officers say that she never looked upset, she never cried, she never really talked about it. She was just living her life, putting on her makeup there. So a year, 9 months, and 26 days after the death of Melissa, the court closed the investigation and set the preparation for the oral trial, where all the evidence would be presented for February 15th, 2023, and that the official trial date was going to be on April 21st, 2023. So both Mirta and Luis were claiming that they were innocent and that they were going to prove that they were innocent at this trial. However, just a few days after the case was closed and the preparatory trial date was set, Mirta was moved from the prison to the San Juan de Dios de la Serena hospital on January 22nd, 2023. Now, the reason she was going to the hospital is because she was suffering from kidney stones, which didn't allow her to sleep and just kept her basically immobilized from the pain. Now, while she was at the hospital, there was actually a photograph of her in the hospital bed that was leaked to the public. Now, her defense team was really mad about this. When they saw the photo and when they realized that she was at the hospital, they were mad because they say that they were not notified of her transfer to the hospital. They only found out because Mirta's sister tried to visit her at the prison a few days before, and the prison guards told her that she wasn't there and that she was in the hospital now. So the lawyers felt like this was unacceptable and that they weren't being, given updates about what was happening to Mirta while she was in prison. So they demanded to be given all the documents explaining the status of her health and the procedures that were going to be done to her to ensure that her health was not put at risk intentionally before the trial. It was granted and it was given to her defense team. She actually spent 6 days at the hospital and then she was finally released. Now, when the public saw the image of Mirta in the hospital bed, a lot of people started to speculate that maybe, this happened so near the date of the trial on purpose, just for the public to get sympathy for her and to feel bad that she had kidney stones and was in the hospital. However, her defense team says that that's not the case, that this is basically all nonsense, and they dismissed it, saying that the trial was going to happen regardless of whether or not Mirta had kidney stones or not. The trial officially began on April 21st, 2023, and the prosecutors collected an abundance of evidence to present and to ensure that Melissa received justice. There was just a lot of evidence to go through, and they say that it was really hard to go through it because everything was just so gruesome about this case. They had to go through the sexual abuse, they had to go through the severe stab injuries, and then they had to go through the fact that Melissa was burned to death. So it was really gruesome and difficult for everyone to go through, and in the end, they presented 67 documents, 31 images, and 11 videos to the jury. They also interviewed 51 witnesses, police, firefighters, and 18 experts that analyzed the site of the event, as well as psychological aspects of the situation and the murder weapon. Officials from the preventative detention center where Mirta was held at also shared their own testimony. So there was just a lot at this trial, and they said that Mirta immediately caught their attention because the first night that she arrived, she was actually dying of laughter with an inmate, and she fell asleep before 10 p.m., showing no signs of sadness or discomfort. Like you would think if you just arrived to a center because your daughter was just brutally killed and then burned to death and then you were being accused of it, you'd probably be sad and not be laughing with another person. But no, she was laughing and then she just went to bed peacefully. It was just really odd. And they also said that for the duration of her time there, she really showed no emotion, no signs of despair for the death of her daughter. They also said that she really cared about her appearance and that she was always putting on makeup and she was always doing whatever she could to look her best. Now, prosecutors say that does not mean that she's guilty. Just because she wants to do her makeup and laugh doesn't mean that she's guilty of murder, but that it does show her character, which raises suspicion since that's not the common behavior of a mother who just lost a child in such a brutal way, but that it can be the behavior of a senseless mother who killed her own child. So prosecutors display all of this information, and a psychologist named Ricardo Bascuñan pointed out that, quote, "Unfortunately, there are psychopathology and antisocial personality disorders where empathetic behavior is practically absent. Therefore, there is no remorse and they will not hesitate to attack someone, develop a plan, and ensure that it does not fail." So during the trial, Melissa's last night alive was described in detail, and they talked about everything that happened the day that she was murdered. Prosecutors actually created a reenactment of it. So the day before Melissa's death, she and Mirta stayed up late watching a series together, they were eating pizza, and they were just hanging out, having a good time. They finished up, and then Melissa returned to her room to relax and, just listen to some music before going to sleep. asleep. The next day, on November 26, 2020, after Luis and their son left at around 10:30 in the morning, Mirta claims that she asked Melissa if she wanted to go with her to do some errands. She actually had to go to the dentist that morning because she was having problems with her teeth. So she asked Melissa, "Do you want to go to the dentist with me?" But apparently Melissa said no, that she couldn't go because she actually had to go take a gift to her friend later that day, so she wanted to stay home. Mirta kept insisting and telling her to come, just come with her to the dentist, but Melissa kept saying no. About an hour later, Mirta finished cleaning the home. She gave the dogs their food because she said that Melissa would forget to do so, and then she left the kitchen window open since Melissa was still there, so she felt okay leaving the window open. And then after this, like I mentioned, she is seen on a neighbor's camera leaving the home and going to an ATM nearby to take out a large amount of money, which is actually backed up with an ATM receipt and the timestamp. Now, when prosecutors and investigators confronted her about this, she says that she took that money out so that she could pay the dentist. And then after she went to the ATM, she left by a Didi, which is like an Uber, at around 11:15 in the morning. So that's pretty much what happened that day, according to Mirta. So in an interview with the dentist Mirta was going to see, he says that Mirta contacted him asking him for the direction of his office so that she could go in the next day to fix her dentures, and that she was very adamant that she urgently needed to go tomorrow because she had an upcoming trip south and she just wanted to fix it before her trip. Now, the day of Melissa's death, she actually messaged him on WhatsApp at 10:43 in the morning with photos of her teeth, but the dentist says that they never continued on and they never actually made an appointment. So they didn't even agree on a time for her to come by to the office to see him. He says that he never even gave her the address of his office. So why was she so adamant on going to the dentist when first she never even booked an appointment? Second of all, she didn't even know his address. Prosecutors say although she claims that she was on her way to the dentist and she is seen leaving to the dentist, she didn't even know where she was going and she didn't even have an appointment. So why was she leaving the home and why did she take out that large amount of money if, again, there's really no proof to show that she was gonna go to the dentist? Now, shortly after Mirta left, Luis and his son were returning home from the son's school vaccination day that they had attended, and as they were approaching the road that led to their house, they started seeing like fire trucks speeding by in the direction of their home. Now, of course, Luis didn't think that they were going to go to his house because I feel like you never think that. If you see firefighters or an ambulance, you never think that they're going somewhere But when Luis arrived to the family's home, that's when he saw all of the emergency services and all of the people, just crowded around there, and that's when he knew that something was wrong. He actually called Mirta and was frantically asking her where she was because the house was on fire. And Mirta told him that she left not too long ago to go to the dentist, but that Melissa insisted on staying home. Now, after hearing this, Luis says that he tried to go inside the house to rescue Melissa because he knew that she was in there, but that the emergency services didn't let him go inside the house. Now, shortly after this, at around 12:02 p.m., Mirta finally arrived back home. So what actually happened before neighbors saw the smoke coming out of the home? Prosecutors presented that between 10:30 in the morning after Luis and his son left and 11:15 a.m. when Mirta left the home, she attacked Melissa with a knife from the home's kitchen while she was lying relaxed in the top of her bunk bed, giving her 11 stab wounds to her body, neck, and face. 2 of them fractured her skull and they injured Melissa's brain. Like I mentioned earlier, these injuries Mirta inflicted were not fatal. They did cause her to hemorrhage, but she could have been saved if she was immediately taken to the hospital or if the paramedics had gotten there sooner. But after Mirta allegedly attacked her, she lit the mattress of the lower bunk as an attempt to destroy any evidence. And then she left her daughter, Melissa, helpless, in pain, alone, and just left to die. Why would a mother want to do this to their own child? What could be reason enough for her to kill Melissa? Everyone just wonders, what happened that night, because they were allegedly just having fun, watching a series, eating pizza, and then the next morning she was killed. Now, the investigation concluded that the motive for Mirta to murder her daughter was something that no one could have expected, something just so horrible. They believed that Mirta murdered her daughter out of jealousy. As I mentioned before, it was discovered in the autopsy that Melissa had been sexually assaulted just 6 hours before her murder by her husband Luis, Melissa's stepfather. And prosecutors say that this is what triggered Mirta. She was jealous of the repeated sexual abuse her husband Luis had been doing to her daughter Melissa, because this had been going on since Melissa was about 6 years old, and because of the fact that he was close to her. Luis's abuse of Melissa that same day drew Mirta over the edge. That last sexual assault Luis did to her caused Mirta to go into a frenzy and kill her own daughter. Instead of Mirta being angry at the man for abusing her 12-year-old daughter, she allegedly was upset at her daughter, at a little girl, at a 12-year-old little girl, her own blood. I never understand how some people can be more mad at the child than the adult. So yeah, prosecutors believe that she killed her out of jealousy for the attention that Luis was giving Melissa. Mirta quite literally silenced Melissa twice. First in 2014 when she retracted her statement to the police, and then again the day of her murder. Prosecutors say that all the evidence that they collected over the last 2 years were ambiguous, and the only person who could have committed this crime was Mirta. This was just so messed up, and just no one could believe it. You know, when the court heard about this and the public, everyone was shocked. A mother is supposed to protect her child at all costs, and Mirta just let Melissa down. Instead of believing her daughter and protecting her, just killed her out of jealousy. Prosecutors say that although Melissa is no longer with us, that, quote, it remains as consolation that the girl's voice could be heard, even in this terrible way, at the scene of the event and the body through the autopsy. Which is very true. Even though she could no longer say what happened to her, you know, her body was able to help get her justice and point, you know, detectives into the right direction as to who did this to her. Now, this is all the prosecution side. Let's discuss what Mirta's defense team presented. Her defense team claims that because a dentist she contacted the day before wasn't responding to her, she decided to go to another dentist, which matches her drop-off destination recorded on the DD app, which again, like I said, is like an Uber app. And they also had 3 witnesses claim that they saw a neighbor who lived right next to Melissa's home, a man named Miguel, who is between 20 to 30 years old, on his roof wearing blue overalls, and that he had a gas mask over his face, and that he was kind of like walking back and forth suspiciously near the home before the fire was started. Now, when neighbors saw the fire, they went to his house and they asked him to, you know, help try to put the fire out, but that this guy Miguel said no, and that he just went back inside his house. And then from that moment, everyone says that Miguel was never seen again, and police have not been able to locate him or his family since this happened. Now, the only other person at the home was his mother, who says that he was gone by the time that she had returned to the home. Now, police did locate his family from his father's side in Santiago, but they were unhelpful and unwilling to help because the father had a criminal record, and, you know, he didn't want to get involved with the police. Now, police also located the mother of Miguel's child, but she says that she hadn't spoken to him since she demanded a paternity test from him. He just vanished and has not come forward to clear up his name. You know, if he was innocent, he could come forward and say, like, explain why he was on the roof with a gas mask and why he was acting a little bit odd, but he hasn't. Police were able to enter his home, but at that point he had already vanished and they really didn't find too much. They did take the overalls that he was wearing that day and they did take some samples from the home, but according to Mirta's defense team, it was never officially entered as evidence in the investigation and it just wasn't taken seriously when there should have been a more rigorous investigation into this. You know, if what the neighbors are saying is true, if they did see him standing on top of the rooftop with a gas mask, you know, walking back and forth, that is a little bit odd. You know, what are the odds that this guy was wearing a gas mask and then there was a fire set that day? It is a little bit weird. Now, the defense team also claims that there was no fingerprint testing done on the doorknob of the back door in Melissa's home that was found open, nor on the window in Melissa's home that would have been able to be reached by Miguel's roof. So the prosecutors completely disregarded this because they said, quote, there is no possible way unless it's a person with superhuman powers who has been able to enter after the defendant left the house, identify the little girl, and then attack her also quickly. Prosecutors also say that there were footprints on the roof where neighbors say that they saw Miguel standing, but that there was no evidence that they led to Melissa's home. So there wasn't any way that he could have been placed in Melissa's home without the footprints creating a path to Melissa's house. Also, because on the murder weapon, there was DNA from a third person on the knife who was an unidentified female, not male. So this kind of just shut down the theory that it could be Miguel and that it could be this man. Mirta's defense team says that they don't even believe that the actual murder weapon was the knife because the knife didn't have blood on it. It only had epithelial cells, which are just like superficial cells humans leave on surfaces they come in contact with. They also said that the knife still had food particles on it, so it was never washed and it was only used as a common household knife for cooking. The prosecutors had forensic evidence that it was indeed washed and their argument was shot down. So apart from this man in the overalls, there was another suspicious man. According to a police officer that was on site once the fire had been controlled and was being put out, a man came up to him and said, quote, I was the first one on site. "I broke the kitchen window." Now, between all the commotion that was happening, the man just suddenly disappeared after he said that to the officer, and although the officer went to go look for him, to formally take down his statement, he was nowhere to be found, and he hasn't been found since he made that statement. He's never come forward to kind of continue with what he was saying. Nothing. According to a neighbor, they did hear a window breaking right before the fire started, and the kitchen window inside Melissa's home was actually broken, so it kind of seems possible. The defense team also shared the results of various simulations that they did and determined that the smoke would have appeared out the window within 1 to 3 minutes of it being lit. And the smoke at Melissa's home took around 8 minutes to appear out of the window, according to the neighbor's surveillance camera. Now, this meant that Mirta could not have lit the fire herself. The defense team was saying that there was a mishandling of Melissa's case and that other hypotheses were not looked further into or even taken more seriously. No, they just feel like the prosecution and the police were biased and that they were only following the only lead that Mirta could have done this. There were many other possible scenarios the day of Melissa's murder, and her lawyer Nicolas said, quote, "We understand that sometimes there is a practice of criticizing the public prosecutor's office, but we do it with a reason, and a bad investigation will produce impunity. We believe not only that Mirta will be acquitted, or that is what we hope, but additionally, we will never know who killed Melissa." So again, they just truly believe that Melissa is innocent. Now, on the other hand, Luis's defense team was arguing the existence of sexual abuse. They argued that the initial report from 2014 was first classified as rape, but upon examination in the ER, which found lesions in her private areas, was claimed by the legal medicine service as neither confirmed nor ruled out. Prosecutors called Greta Macuran, a psychologist from the University of Havana, Cuba, to the stand, who Nicholas asked to review the validity of the 2014 complaint that Melissa had made against Luis. So Greta analyzed the report and argued that it was done completely incorrectly. She says that, first of all, the report only took 2 days, which is not enough time for a child to open up nor discuss fully what happened in order to collect the necessary data regarding the allegations, giving the complaint no validity. After interviewing Greta, a man named Luis Cepeda was brought to the stand to review the autopsy provided by LMS. Luis has been a medical surgeon since the 90s with training in the assessment of sexual crimes in various countries, such as Scotland, South Korea, and Israel. He is an accredited coroner in the United States, and he's actually currently vice president of the World Association of Legal Medicine. So he has a lot of credibility, and upon reviewing the photographs and the full written autopsy of Melissa, Luis said that none of the photos demonstrated the injuries that were described in the written autopsy report. He did, however, say that there were injuries caused by the fire, and he concluded that Melissa's autopsy, quote, "does not reveal injuries consistent with traumas from anal or vaginal penetration," basically saying that none of her injuries show that she was assaulted before her death. Luis and Mirta were extremely confident that they were going to get an acquittal. Luis's defense team also claimed that from expert reports, the injuries Melissa had the day of her murder are not conclusive to rape and that there was no biological material from Luis found in her body. Now, after hearing this, prosecutors argued that there was no other man in constant contact with Melissa, nor any other man who could have entered the home. By logic, it could have only been Luis. However, the judge said since there was no concrete evidence provided, they would lift the order of preventative detention and instead place Luis on house arrest and on a travel ban until the trial would begin. Of course, this did not clear Luis as being innocent, not until there was a verdict. Now, Mirta's defense team also argues that how Mirta behaved in her interviews and how she was acting the first day that she was placed in the preventative detention center does not mean that she's guilty. They say that there was an abuse of speculation in this case and that she's not guilty just because she was seen putting on her makeup, combing her hair, and just trying to look put together. They say that how a suspect acts will just never satisfy the public. That if someone is too, alerted or is too calm, that they will be subject to morbid speculation and that Mirta has fallen a victim to this. Now, witnesses from the prosecutor's side said that Mirta and Luis didn't even hug each other or console each other the day of Melissa's death, which showed Mirta had no remorse for what was done. But again, her defense team argued that if they had hugged and if Luis was frantic, that people would have been like, oh, they're acting a little bit too crazy. So they're basically trying to say that no matter how Mirta or Luis acted the day of Melissa's death, that people still would have not been happy with it. Mirta's defense team believed wholeheartedly in her innocence as well as her family and presented a lot of evidence, experts, and testimonials to prove that she was innocent. So speaking of Melissa's family, they actually received a lot of hate by the public, and Danisa Aria, Melissa's aunt and Mirta's sister, said that their whole family is being accused of being accomplices to this and that they are under so much scrutiny and that they haven't even been able to mourn the loss of Melissa. In an interview, she said, quote, "Before she was arrested, she told me she didn't do it and that she loved Melissa, su gorda," which is kind of like a nickname. Not only the life of a little girl was destroyed here, but the entire life of our entire family. It is difficult. I did not want to speak, but I am doing it because it is our truth. We have nothing to hide. When I hear what they say my sister did, it's like I'm hearing them talk about a person I've never met, a monster, not my sister. I have known my sister my entire life, and she is not a violent person. Now, Melissa's sister actually came out and spoke, and she said, quote, "I trust my mother. I know what her relationship with my sister was like, and that keeps me calm. I never saw anything wrong with my mom against my sister." Which I understand. It's probably very hard to, see that your mom is being accused of something so terrible. Your mother is being accused of murdering your sister. So I understand, why she wants to take her mom's side, and, maybe she didn't see any type of abuse happen between Melissa and her mom, and, she truly believes that her mom is actually innocent. I know this was like a lot of information. There was just so much to talk about in this case and so much that happened during the trial, but in the end, the trial came to an end, and 3 years after Melissa's death on May 27th, 2023, a verdict was made by 3 judges. In the end, Mirta was found guilty, and she was sentenced to 33 years in prison, minus the 845 days that she spent in the preventative detention center. And then Luis was also guilty, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison plus 1 day, minus the 556 days that he spent in the preventative detention center. Now, this came as an absolute shock to Mirta and Luis's defense team, since they honestly believed that they were innocent and that there wasn't enough evidence to prove that they were guilty. The prosecutor on the case also made a statement and said, quote, "We can draw a lesson as society to always listen to children. Put them first before any other circumstance or consideration. Be attentive, especially the families close to the children and adolescents, to their environment, be it schools, neighbors, or friends." The trial was extensive because the means of proof were extensive and had to be linked together through the testimony of witnesses, experts, and police officers. We managed to put together this complex police and investigative puzzle, since the site of the event had been altered by another crime, arson. It was difficult to collect and analyze the evidence, but thanks to the help of various institutions and civilians, we were able to clarify what happened on the day of the events. So we will see what happens. I will keep you guys posted on any new movements in the case, but I would definitely love to know your thoughts on this, because while the majority of the people believe that Mirta and Luis did do this, that Mirta was the one that killed her daughter and set the house on fire, and that Luis did abuse her, there are some people that believe that they're innocent. Some people truly believe that it was a stranger that did this. Maybe one of the few men that neighbors had seen around the house, or, something like that. But a lot of people do believe that they're innocent, and I don't know, I would just love to know what you guys think about this case. This one is just really difficult to talk about and listen to because what happened to Melissa is so heartbreaking. Her death truly impacted Chile, and the public showed so much support for Melissa. A year after her death, a ceremony was held in memory of her, and the community prayed that she receive justice. There was music, photos, candles, posters of her, balloons, decorations, and a lot of people showed up showing their support to Melissa. There was also marches held by the community demanding Mirta and Luis to be held responsible for what happened to her. To this day, people still decorate the home where Melissa died, and the neighbors try their best to keep the street in front of her home clean and, organize any gifts left to keep her memory alive. It just breaks my heart, that Melissa claimed that she was being abused by her stepfather. And, thankfully she was taken out of the house and she was put in the care of other relatives. But then the social workers just took her back. They took her back to Mirta's house because they took her word saying that Luis was no longer going to be in their life, which was a lie. It's just really frustrating, and it breaks my heart when things like this happen. It kind of just reminds me of the Gabriel Fernandez case, how there was just a flaw in the system, and it's not fair because, I don't know, Melissa ended up dead in such a brutal way. It's not right, and like I said, this just shows a flaw in a system that's meant to care for minors and just make sure that they're safe. I don't know, this one one just really broke my heart. I don't know how a mother could do this to a child. If it really was Mirta and she did this because she was jealous of Melissa, God, that's just so wrong. I never understand how parents can be jealous of their kids. Like, I don't get it. But yeah, my thoughts and prayers go out to Melissa and to her family. I am so sorry that this happened to her. She was only 12 years old and she did not deserve this. She had a full life ahead of her, and it's unfortunate that it was cut so short. But alright, you guys, with that is pretty much all the information I have as to what happened to Melissa Chávez. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to be here and to listen to today's video. I truly appreciate it. If you guys have not heard the latest episode of my podcast, it would mean a lot to me if you guys could go check it out. You know, go listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or you can watch the video version right here on my YouTube channel. That would really mean a lot to me, and if there's ever any other cases that you guys would like me to cover, make sure to leave me a comment down below so I can add it to my list. This is actually the last video that I'm filming before I go on my little break. I'm gonna go out of town for a wedding, so yeah, this is the last video for like my regular main channel videos, but I will be uploading 2 podcast videos, so make sure to stay tuned for that. But alright, you guys, enough chit chatter. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye, guys.